Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Greetings of the day, friends. Now we start with lecture number 7. In the last lecture, I ended explaining aggregate measurement of support. So, what basically is aggregate measurement of support? That is the annual level of support expressed in monetary terms. Now, the term used is expressed in monetary terms, provided for an agriculture product in favor of producers of basic agriculture product, or non-product specific support provided in favor of agriculture producers in general other than the support that are exempt under Annexure 2 of the Agreement on Agriculture. So firstly, I would like to explain that there is a list of exemptions under Annexure 2 of Agreement on Agriculture. So if the measurement of support or the support does not fall in this annexure, that is annexure 2, then that will be calculated as an aggregate measurement of support. Then it states annual level of support expressed in monetary terms. So it can be support expressed in monetary value. That means if the government is providing subsidy in or any kind of support in monetary terms, like it says per quintal, let's say the cost of wheat is 1000 rupees per quintal, and the government says, let's say the farmer has to pay, or let's say the farmer invests 1000 rupee for the production of 1 quintal of the crop of wheat, and the government then announces 100 rupees as subsidy. Now the farmer will have to invest 900 rupees for 1 quintal of the wheat. So that is like the relationship established. But that is the monetary expression of the support being provided, and that is on a specific crop basis. Like the announcement is for only wheat crop, it could be only for the sugarcane crop, and then in addition to that there can be a general waiver, or there can be a general financial support, like I was explaining, the loans being waived off to all the farmers who have purchased the tractor, or it could be the general waiver of the loan to the farmers belonging to particular region. So that is also the general waiver. Now if we club this, the general waiver plus the specific waiver being, or specific support being given to the farmer growing a particular crop, and that does not fall in annexure 2 of Agreement on Agriculture, so that will be then covered under aggregate measurement of support. And this aggregate measurement of support is connected with amber box. That means the state is supposed to reduce the amount of aggregate measurement of support being given. Now how this happens? Like we start with the year 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. All right. So country X is giving aggregate measurement of support to its farmers, and like it gives, if we calculate, then it comes out to be 1000 rupees. Here also, now this is supposed to be reduced on an annual basis, so it should be 900, then maybe 850, or somewhat like that. Here also there should be a reduced amount, and this is calculated on an annual basis, and then sometime it can be annual basis, sometime it can be based on 5 years, and then this is reported before the WTO, and then the WTO questions if the country has not fulfilled this obligation, the reduced sizable amount of aggregate measurement of support as being committed, then it questions that member state that why are you not reducing the support that you are supposed to. So that is how it functions. Or it can say that instead of going for this crop, why not to import this crop? So these are the questions they have to answer. And in the case, the similar such position arose when India was asked that firstly they are giving minimum support price to the farmers who are growing sugarcane, and then the state of Uttar Pradesh is giving extra support to the farmers growing sugarcane through the sugar mills. Like the sugar mills, they are providing special concession to the farmers growing the sugarcane. So there is a dual subsidy. Minimum support price is acceptable, then extra subsidy being provided to the through the sugar mills, that is having the trade distorting effect, and that should be reduced, or that should be stopped. That was, and there are other forms of support also that was clubbed when the question was discussed in the WTO. So that is how the conditioning is done, how the trade of agriculture goods has to be made more fair and regulated by the WTO rules. Some of the subjects covered in the green box category, as we were discussing amber box, blue box, and now the green box category, that are totally exempt from this reduction commitment, and we do not consider them as having the trade distorting effects. They are meant for the purpose of research, including general research and research for particular products. As you know, the farm institutes or the agriculture research institutes, they are involved in doing the research work to improve the kind of food grains, variety of the food grains, or the seeds, various kind of seeds that are pest resistant, or they can give the good yields. So there are many areas of research, but then the question is that requires a lot of investment from the government sector, and that should be totally exempted from those categorization where the subsidies are supposed to be reduced. So that is one area. Next is pest and disease control measures. So if the government is investing for, let's say, controlling the crops from disease or the pests, then that kind of measures or any such support directly being given to the farmers to employ those methods and mechanism, that should be covered, or that basically are covered under the green box category. Training services, including general and specific matters. Now, as you know, many times farmers are supposed to be trained how to use particular method of farming, or how they can get better yields, or in case they have to protect their agriculture fields from floods. So or they have to use some sustainable methods of crop production, then that requires a special kind of educational program. That means the government has to invest in those educational programs, so they are also covered under the green box category. Then is services for inspection of particular health safety measures, that are also the health safety measures. That means the right kind of food we are getting, that covers the hygiene standard, that covers the health requirement, the basic health requirement. So they involve expenditure, and that expenditure has to be covered under the green box category. Infrastructural services, including electricity, reticulation, roads, and other means of transport. So these are the infrastructure support that also demands heavy expenditure, and all that is exempted and is covered under the green box categories. Farm subsidies as a tug of war between developed and developing countries. Now, often you know that during various conferences or during various annual meetings or biannual meetings in the WTO, these issues are discussed, and there is always polarization of the sides, where developed nation and the developing nation all blaming on each other for giving the subsidies to their farmers. Now, what basically is the issue that creates that kind of rift between the developing countries and the developed countries? Firstly, many of the developed countries, they are giving subsidies to their farmer either in direct manner or in an indirect manner, but they are asking the developing nations not to give subsidies to their farmers. First is, what will be the effect? That they want, since they have already attained the high yield level, that means the developed country, it is not that they are simply developed because of their industrial advancement, but some of the developed countries, not all, they are also like they have very high yield, farm yield, so they want that their farm products should also be sold in the developing countries market, whereas they compel these developing countries, or often they say that these developing nations, they should not give subsidies to the farmer, because that creates a trade distorting effect when we talk about the concerns of the international trade or the concerns of the WTO. Now there is another aspect to this problem. I write it like this: developed nations giving subsidy to their farmers causes high yield. And they want export that farm product. All right. But the contention is that this creates trade distortion. This is the first thing. The second is the another aspect why developing nations, they want to sustain their farm sector. Okay, I write this: developing nations, mainly developing and less developed nation, to sustain their farm sector. All right. Now the developing nations and the less developed countries, they what they export, that is the first question. Some of the developing nations, they definitely have started exporting technological products, not very high end technological products, but at least some level of technological products they have started exporting, and by exporting that they are earning foreign exchange. But there are many of the developing countries and many of the less developed countries who are not able to export any kind of technological products. So what they are exporting? They are exporting either natural resources or farm products. All right. Now by exporting these natural resources or farm products, they are earning foreign exchange, and by that earning, the earning of that foreign exchange, they are able to buy the technological know-how, the at least some extent of technological products from these developed countries. So if they do not sustain their farming sector, or if they do not give subsidies to their farmers, then that farm sector will start depleting. That will be taken over by those developed countries, and the developed countries will be exporting their farm products to all these countries, these less developed countries. And as a consequence of it, the foreign exchange that they were able to earn by exporting their farm products, these less developed countries and developing countries, their farm products, that will be over. So they will not be able to earn that foreign exchange. So they will have to depend upon the foreign loans, or the loans through the foreign institution, or then they may even have to devalue their currency at different intervals. So that will create a very big problem, and they will never be able to overcome from this debt trap kind of position, or they will never be able to shift their rural economical setup to an industrial advancement sector, because that simply is not only a policy framework shift in the policy framework, that from rural economic setup the nation transforms itself into an industrial mode, but it requires lot of investment, and that investment means depending upon the foreign exchange and also the technological know-how. So that is what it means here. For them it is very crucial to have the farm sector, or support being given to the farm sector, and that by and large creates the kind of rift when we talk about the tug of war between developed and developing economies. Now within the developed economies there are other reasons also. This is the case mainly, you can correlate it with the US, that US has very high yield of the crops. Same is not the case with the European Union, because in European Union their climatic conditions, part of the Europe, they don't have very favorable climatic conditions when it comes to the farm sector or for the farm produce. So there they have a different issue, or they have different reasons for giving the subsidy. Now, why the European Union gives the subsidy to its farmers? Firstly, they also want that every member state of the European Union must have certain sustainable level of farming. They are not happy with the idea that they should depend upon imported farm products. Why? Because they have seen the historical times. They have gone for First World War, Second World War, and many times Europe has been at war. I mean, now you can see. So if they rely upon the imported food grains, then there will be a big catastrophe, or their system may be a big failure. So therefore, they want that all the member states, they should produce at least the sustainable level of farm. That is one reason. Secondly, the European Union is based on consolidation of the member states that were independent. Now that consolidation of the member state was based on certain promises, and one such promises was with regard to how to solve the question of farmer subsidy. So there they played a trick, that they said there can be two type of farm support, or there can be farm support from the two level. One will be at a horizontal level and the other will be at the vertical level. So what is that horizontal and vertical level? Firstly, the European farmers, they will get the support from the European Union, that is at the central level. Secondly, those European farmers can get the financial support from the local level, that is through their state or from their country side. That means, like, if we consider Greece, Portugal, Spain, these are the countries. So the farmers of these countries, they can get the support from two level, one from the European level. Secondly, they can also claim the farm support from their government, that is Portuguese farmer can claim support from the Portuguese government. The Greek farmers, they can get the support, or they can claim the support from the Greek government, and likewise. So that is the two way, or the support being provided to the farmers on a dual basis. And if you compare it with the situation of the developing and less developed countries that are often blamed of giving the support to their farmers, you see on one side they are giving support only to sustain their, or to solve their food problem, as I have discussed with you, the question of food security, or to get some minimal amount of foreign exchange earning, so that they can gradually adopt the industrial mode of production, or they can also get some technological know-how. So that is one aspect. On the other side, the European farmers, they are getting so much of farm subsidy, I would not mind saying that the farm subsidy they get is to the extent that even that is at a very surprising rate. That is what I would say here. Of course, there is a joke that their cow can go to a dance for in a nightclub in Las Vegas and return. That is the extent of subsidy that is provided to the farmers in the European Union. So that kind of distortion is already there, but they are not ready to accept in this context. Condition before the formation of the WTO, the subject of agriculture subsidies could not be brought into any institutional discipline. Now, simply, I am not here blaming the European Union giving support to the farmers. That was happening prior to the formation of the WTO, and the argument forwarded by European Union was that they do not want, their climatic conditions are harsh, firstly. Secondly, they do not want to rely on the foreign markets for the farm products, as they have border with Russia. So they always think this as a rival country, and Russia is a very self-sufficient in terms of the basic food, and they were willing to include this Ukraine, because Ukraine is another country where food is in abundance. So they wanted that if Ukraine is included, that will be a big support in terms of their farmers, in terms of the farm produce. So that kind of thinking they already had. But anyway, that has led them to different directions. So they never wanted it for the reason that they borders with Russia. Secondly, they have always been involved in the wars, so they wanted all the member states of the WTO must be self-sufficient. So that these primary conditions have compelled them to be like that. And when they discussed these issues before the WTO, they always like stated that a minimum amount of subsidy should be allowed. All right. Now this led to the demand for commitment-based reduction of the state support. Now, since the WTO was initiated by United States and Britain and not by the continental European countries, so US and other countries, mainly the Britain, they agreed that of course we are not going to get rid of these subsidies, farm subsidies at one go, but there has to be a gradual removal of or gradual reduction of subsidies even in the Europe. Several times committees were framed for knowing the urgency of the developing countries. Now this has been happening during the time of GATT also, that why the developing nations also are emphasizing subsidies being provided to their farmers. Now for developing nations, the real agenda is the giving subsidies to the farmer is to link it with the development agenda, because developing nations cannot be like that they start promoting industrialization and they start weakening the farm sector. It has to be a balanced growth, and balanced growth means the state support being provided to the farm sector and sometime to the industrial sector. So in that manner, whereas in the European system, the question here arises how the European system is managing with the farm subsidy. Now European system has taken another way. Their way is that they have advanced in the industrial production, and out of that industrial gain, like whatever is their earning from the export of industrial products or export of technological products, part of that gain or part of that earning is used to improve or let's say to support the farmer. So it is not simply they are relying upon that is the difference here, or that is how they justify their farm support. It is not based on the taxpayers' money simply, but it is out of the industrial earning or the technological gains. From there, the earnings that they are getting from those technological gains, they tried part of that they use it for the farm subsidies. The issue-based divide between developing countries is also termed as North-South divide in the WTO. But one thing should be very clear, that within the developed nation countries, the situation of United States with regard to the agriculture subsidies or agriculture policy is different. The situation of European Union with regard to agriculture subsidies or the policy framework of the European Union in terms of agriculture subsidy is different. We should not generalize it that all developed countries are like pushing this agenda for the developing nations, but although they are pushing, but they both have different reasons. The issue of trade and development, that is more pertaining to the developing nations. Now, waiver from most favored nation clause. Now the developing nations have also advocated, developing nations, that on one side the developed countries are advocating free movement of goods or free trade, and for the promotion of trade for the promotion of the idea of free trade, they have advocated a very key formula, that is most favored nation clause. Now there should be waiver from this most favored nation clause because the countries, they are in a different economic situation. The economic situation is very important when we try to allow the imported product to be sold in the domestic market without making any discrimination. And if the imported product cannot be discriminated or different taxes cannot be imposed, then definitely it will also affect by and large the farm sector. And finally, if the farm sector is somehow, let's say, if it suffers, then basically the entire economy of many of the developing nations, that will start suffering. So that kind of thing, that most favored nation clause in terms of farm sector can be a bit controversial, or it has shown controversial aspects. Although most favored nation clause in terms of other goods or the industrial goods somehow seems to be negotiable, but with regard to the farm products, giving the equal treatment, that definitely seems very controversial when it comes to the basic economic setup of large number of the developing countries. The physical balance between industrial sector and the agriculture sector in the case of developed countries. Now they have already achieved the right kind of balance that should be there between industrial side and the agriculture side, both the European Union and the United States. So therefore they do think that the same should be the case with the developing nations, but the developing nations and the less developed nations, they have not attained the right kind of balance between the industrial output that is required and the farm output that their society needs. Still the countries are facing the food security crisis. So therefore the similar notions or the similar concepts that they are applying cannot be applied in many of the developing nations and the less developed countries. The economic imbalances in the case of developed and less developed countries. So here, as we know, here it should be the economic imbalances in case of developing and less developed countries. Sorry for this. In comparative cost advantage theory in the matters, is comparative cost advantage theory in matters of agriculture trade correct application of economic concept? Now, so far as the WTO is concerned, and its fundamental relies very much on the comparative cost advantage. Now that is based on the factors of production, where it allows the different kind of industrial goods to be produced, even if that cannot be best produced, but that creates the scope of application of different factors of production, and likewise those factors of production will be benefited by those foreign exchanges. But similar such theories cannot be applied for the purpose of agriculture trade, because agriculture is something that creates the political stability, that gives the protection of constitutional rights of the countries. It is not simply an economic concept. And then definitely it saves the foreign exchange, or let's say the country's economic resources, from being drained out to the other countries, and that also for the basic needs. And even so far as the society is concerned, the society can get panicked any time if they realize that there is no food security in their country. So they simply we cannot go by the reasoning advocated by the comparative cost advantage fans, but we have to analyze this from very different aspects, not only the comparative cost aspects, but political factors, the constitutional goals, the economic factors, the social factors, and so and so. The policy objective of the member states, developed, developing, needs to outline the constructive role of subsidies for welfare and development that are based on the concept of equity and distributive justice. For example, India's free distribution of grains to the needy and minimum support price. Now, when we analyze the agriculture policies, there we need to draw a very clear line of distinction, that whether these are meant for the purpose of export promotion, whether these kind of state support given to the farmers, they are meant for balancing the price in the domestic market, and it should be seen both by the developed countries and the developing countries. Basically the developed countries, they do have the habit of pointing the fingers towards the developing countries, but they do not realize the kind of problems that are being faced. So here it is urgently required to draw an outline for the constructive role of subsidy. That means the positive role being played for the farm support given by the government, both for the welfare and the development purpose, and based on the concept of equity and distributive justice. Now that is not the economic concept. Equity and distributive justice, they are the concept of law and morality, where we expect that in a society everyone should be given justice to the extent that they are not, that they do not feel deprived of the food, the basic food, or they must be confident enough that in this society there is a justice existing to the extent that they will get 3 square meals a day. So that is what should be the notion, not simply the concept of economics, whether the comparative cost advantage theory should be applied for the purpose of agriculture trade or not. Now this is what we see in India when we talk about the free distribution of grains in India, and then the minimum support price. Now what is MSP, or minimum support price, and why this is advocated by the government? Now minimum support price is, let's say, that this is advertised, the price advertised before the harvest. Now, there are certain listed crops for which the government announces minimum support price. What is that? Let's take example of rice, wheat, several others. Okay, then before the harvest, that means the crop has not been even sown, the government announces for the year 2023, for year 2024, that minimum price at which the government will purchase rice or wheat per quintal will be, let's say, 1000 rupees. Okay, that is the minimum price. Below this, although it could be the cost which the farmer has to pay for sowing, or let's say for one quintal of the crop, there that may be even 800 rupees, all right, or it can be even 1100 rupees. Okay, how it goes? Like the government gives announces even at an early stage where even the crops are not even harvested and sometimes not even sown, that this year the government is willing to purchase the rice or wheat or several other crops at this and this rate. Now, how does it work? So and that minimum support price is generally higher than the price at which the farmer invests. Okay, that means the farmer has to pay 800 rupees, or it has to invest 800 rupees per quintal, and it will get the support as per the quoted price 1000 rupees. Now, why this is announced? Now, there are chances that when the farmer has harvested, there can be climatic challenges. There has been a rainfall, and now instead of 800 rupees, the farmer may have to invest 1200 rupees. But now, as the minimum price is quoted is 1100, the farmer will get 1100. Or there can be infection by those insects or certain pests, so still it will get this much amount. Now, why the government announces this? Because the government wishes the farmer, they should not be deprived of, or they should continue growing these basic crops that are very essential for our livelihood. They should not get deviated thinking that they will get more profit if they go for some other type of crops. So, minimum support price is quoted here. Second reason is they should not be exploited by those who are private buyers. All right. Now, how the private buyers can exploit? Like the private buyer can say that since, let's say, your cost for production of rice per quintal is 800 rupees, but your crop is not good quality, it is not worth 800 rupees, I am not going to buy. So, where will the farmer go? It has no other option. So, it may have to sell the same crop to a private buyer at the cost of 700 rupees. So, that means it has to bear the loss of 100 rupees. So, in order to avoid these kind of exploitive measures or exploitation in the society, primarily or even at a preliminary stage, the government quotes the minimum support price, and that is not simply done by the government willingly. Sometimes it is the farmers lobby that gives the quotation that this should be the quoted price, but it is not purely the farmers lobby also, I must make it clear. There are agriculture economists sitting, those who calculate that these are the factors of production involved in the farm produce, or like when we talk about the wheat, so these are the factors of production applied for the wheat, like the farmer will purchase the seed, farmer will purchase fertilizers, it will, if it has a expected tractor loan, so it will be paying the loans, interest on the loans on an average amount of this and this rate. So, by and large, and then sometime the rent of the land is also quoted, and then the price is fixed that let's assume this year it should be 1000 rupees per quintal minimum support price. So, that is how we see that kind of support, whether we should see that as a subsidy of an amber box category, or we should see that as a blue box subsidy, or that should be seen as some kind of very necessary intervention by the farmers. Now, you can see if the farmers deviate from this, they stop growing wheat and rice and other pulses that are very important for us, then what will be the fate of the society? There will be definitely a kind of panic situation. So in order to maintain, we need to see this from the perspective of distributive justice. We cannot apply here the cost advantage theory or demand and supply theory, but here we go by the fair price that the farmer should get. Okay, fair price of the crop that the farmer should get. And this was the reason when we talk about the farm protest, that in the farm bills the government failed to quote the minimum support price and what could be the procedure to get that minimum support price from the private buyers. Okay, the private buyers were, no doubt the government initiated the bill, initiating that the private buyers, they will buy the crops. There is no bad thing in that. But if they dictate their terms, that if they are not ready to buy the crop in a quoted price, then what will be the remedy? And who will decide what is the quoted price? What is the mechanism to decide the quoted price? Whereas in case of minimum support price, that is through the government measures. And there are many kind of pressure tactics, and the government knows that what should be the minimum support price on the basis of data that is going on for the past several years. So that there is a clear transparency here. So that was one of the reason here why minimum support price is fairly advocated at times by the Indian farmers, and we should not consider this as some kind of trade distorting subsidy. It is basically the kind of support being provided to the farmer in order to sustain our farm sector, and also that there is a kind of food safety and food security to all of us. The agriculture sector and the rural economy of the developing and less developed countries provides the, now how in another respect we should see the farm economy or the agriculture economy. It is not only confined to what we see as the farmer selling the crops, but there are many activities. It's a totally different culture if we see the rural culture. Take the example of India, and we cannot simply confine it to the India. If you take the example of most of the developing and less developed countries where there is a shift from the rural sector to the urban sector, or where the economy very much relies on the output from the rural sector. So if you see this, it is totally a different culture and economical setup and the political setup that works there. So what basically it is, the agriculture sector and the rural economy of the developing and less developed countries firstly provides the native people with adequate, affordable and culturally affordable food. They have plenty of food stock. I mean, in the villages there are trees and anyone can pluck the fruit, so they don't have to purchase it. Sometimes it goes by the barter system, and if they purchase the same from the open market, then they may have to pay 4 times, 5 times the price, which they are not able to afford. So for the native people, it is a very cheap source of good quality food, and why they should be deprived of it in the name of development or in the name of urbanization? They should not be deprived of it. So secondly, it offers the rural people in every country the opportunity to earn and remain settled in rural areas. That means we often talk about the growing pressure in the urban areas because there is a migration of the people from rural sector to the urban sector. But if the rural sector is competent enough, or there are proper means of livelihood, there is proper means of sustainability in the rural economy itself, then there will be less pressure on the urbanization or in such a race for the urbanization. So we must realize this fact that the agriculture sector entirely, it offers the rural people in every country the opportunity to earn and remain settled. Now you can say that our large part of the labor force that gets some kind of direct or indirect employment in the farm sector. They at least they can work as the farm labor during their free time, or at the time when they are not actively involved in the other earning activities or in other professional activities. So there is some kind of support they can always give. Next is promotes economic development at the local and regional level. Now after the rural sector gets stronger, that creates the scope for other economic activities, like we know that can be in the form of fishiculture, dairy farming, then we can have animal husbandry and several others. So the local and regional level, there can be other scopes created for the economic development that are related with the rural economy, or let's say the agriculture sector. And if we totally say that now, since the farmers, they are not able to produce the crop at this price, or we should stop our farmers from producing these crops and rather go for the privatization, or we should import these farm products. So it is not only that those farmers will suffer, but other related collateral activities that creates lot of economic support, like I have quoted you, animal husbandry, poultry, dairy farming, all that will start suffering. So we need to take a very holistic view of the consequences that will be there in case we deprive them of the farm activity. The farming sector is still one of the main source of employment for the people in the developing and less developed countries. Next is another very key concept, that is the de minimis level of support, which is exempted. Now, what is de minimis level of support? We have discussed about the amber box subsidies, we have discussed blue box, and also the green box. Now, the de minimis level is the support level being provided both by the developed countries and the developing countries, where the minimum extent where they are exempted, like if they give 5% of the support, 5% of the support of the total cost, then they are exempted from being categorized as the subsidies, or 2% of the support of the total cost, so then also they are exempted. So de minimis level is the minimum level of support that can be provided without being challenged, or let's say other way around, the since it is a very marginal level of support, so that cannot be considered as capable of producing trade distorting effect. Therefore, it is not taken into consideration while counting or while calculating the subsidies. So de minimis level of support is exempted here. Beyond de minimis level of support, the agriculture subsidies are considered as trade distorting. Now, there are certain relevant cases here. One is Korea measures affecting import of fresh, chilled and frozen beef, WTO DS 161/R. WTS means World Trade Dispute Settlement Resolution 161. The issue in dispute raised by US was concerning the Korea's regulatory scheme. The extent of aggregate measurement of support provided by Korea was more than de minimis level. This is the case with regard to the de minimis level, where I have stated that there is a amount fixed as per the agreement on agriculture, that beyond this amount, if a country or if any government gives support beyond that stipulated amount, then that will be considered as subsidies, and the issues of prohibiting that subsidies or the subsidies creating trade distorting effect will be questioned. Now, here in this case, the support was provided by the Korean government with regard to frozen beef, and that was challenged by the United States as the support being provided more than de minimis level. Now, what was the consequence? As a consequence of it, the Korea has to withdraw that amount of subsidy, since it fairly was in excess of the de minimis amount. So this was basically how we define the term de minimis. Next is another case, United States subsidies on upland cotton. Now, this is a very interesting case, because as I have stated to you, that many times developed nation, they are providing subsidies to their farmers, and for that, what is the effect? The farmers are able to produce that kind of crop, whether it is a cash crop or the cereal crop, at a lesser price, or even if they are producing at a higher price, then they can sell it at a lesser price, because part of that money or part of the extra amount is given by the government. So I mean to say, they can sell the cash crop or the cereal crop at a lesser price, and whatever loss they are suffering, that will be compensated by the government. Now, so far as it is up till confined, this practice is confined up till the domestic market, the story is different. But sometimes that goes for the export promotion, like the US has done it. In case of upland cotton, the considerable price suppression of cotton in international market was considered because of the US subsidies by the US 90. The US lawmakers, they enacted a law. As per their law, they provided special concessions to the farmers who were growing cotton. And as a reason for this, what happened? That there was an abundance of American cotton being produced, and finally that was exported in the foreign markets. Now, since that cotton was exported in the foreign markets, their arch rival or the other countries who are exporting cotton there, that is from Africa, so they had to reduce their price in order to sustain in the market. The African countries, they had to reduce that price, so because they were facing the pressure from the American cotton. And that was the price of the American cotton was not based on any fair valuation. That was because of the subsidies being provided by the US government to the US farmers. So that led to a dispute, and the matter was brought before the WTO, which was entitled as US state support subsidies on upland cotton. The considerable price suppression of cotton in the international market was considered because of the subsidies by the US. Now, how the appellate body decided? The appellate body in this case upheld the panel's finding that the GSM 102, that is the type of subsidies being provided, export credit guarantees issued after 1st July 2005, were export subsidies within the meaning of Article 3.1A of the SCM agreement and Article 10.1 of the Agreement on Agriculture. Arguing in the context, now what is 3.1A of the SCM agreement? That is the subsidies that are meant for the export promotion. And bear in mind, here the developed countries, they don't have any relaxation. Had it been the developing countries, even then they could not have obtained much of the relaxation, because that falls under the prohibited category, except the since it has no trade distorting effect, so they can get the developing nations can get the exemption if it has no trade distorting effect, even if it is meant for the export promotion. So here it has created a price suppression on a global basis, the American cotton. So they were considered as an export promotion subsidies that lies under the prohibited category of subsidies and countervailing measure agreement, Article 3.1A of the SCM agreement and 10.1 of the Agreement on Agriculture. Arguing in the context of trade regulatory measures based on various WTO agreements, it can be said that the practice of agriculture dumping significantly affects less developed countries and also developing countries' agriculture trade. So this matter was not only confined to the subsidies meant for the export promotion, but also for the purpose of agriculture dumping. Now, what is basically agriculture dumping? I'll come to the point here. In the less developed countries, export of agriculture products is vital for food, rural livelihood and poverty reduction. Their economic base is pushed into risk level if the developed nations continue dumping food products. Now, comparing the situation of the developed country and that with the less developed country, it is clear that if the developed countries keep on giving the subsidies, so what will be the effect? And giving the subsidies to the food grains and also meant for the agriculture purposes, that means that will vitally affect the food market in the less developed countries, and consequently they will not be able to export their products, their farm products. Now, what is basically agriculture dumping? The practice of dumping under the WTO rules, basically that is dumping is exporting the goods at a price lesser than their original value, original cost, okay, or whatever is the actual cost. So exporting it at lesser than that. Sometime it could be defined that if the price difference, like the same good that is sold in the domestic market is at a lesser price and the good that is exported is at a sorry to say here, if the domestic good that is sold in the domestic market, it is at a higher price, and the goods that are exported that are at a lesser price. For example, country A produces cotton, and it is sold in its domestic market for $10 quintal and exported at $9 per quintal. So this means the export price is less than the normal value or less than the price in the domestic market. Now, why this is done? This is called as termed as the practice of dumping. This is in order to capture the foreign market, and the loss that they are bearing here, the whatever loss they are borne here, that is the loss of $1 here, that is supported by the subsidies provided by the state. So that means the subsidy has its another effect, that is the not only confined to trade distorting effect, but also sometime it can be used for the promotion of dumping, which we will discuss in detail during the lecture on dumping, promotion of dumping. Now, so far as this is confined to the trade between two developed nations, the loss won't be very severe. But when the goods are dumped, mainly the agriculture goods are dumped by the developed countries to the less developed countries, then there can be a very big issue, or that can be very catastrophic. For example, if the American farmers, let's take the example, if the American farmers they start dumping the agriculture product in the state of Cuba, which is a small country, so how far it will be able to sustain that way? If we see the problem in that sense, then we can realize what could be the effect. Now, next is another issue that has come up very recently, that is the subsidies for biofuels. Firstly, we know that the world has started advocating, or not only world but mainly the institutions throughout, they have started advocating to shift the mode of energy. That means to go for more of the sustainable mode, and that means to find out various sources of the renewable energy or more of the sustainable energy. And one such they have found in producing the biofuels. The biofuels can help in generating the sustainable sources, or they can give and they can be an alternative to the fossil fuels. So it says the lure of renewable fuels has created an urge for biofuels among the member states, from those concerned about reliance on fossil fuels to those who perceive renewable fuels can be used for commercial purpose. Now, getting back to the classification of agriculture subsidies again, or the types of subsidies for agriculture purposes again, that is based on amber box, then the blue box and the green box. Now, if we go for research and development, the use of subsidies for the purpose of research and development, then we categorize it in green box. Now, if we are investing the subsidies or applying the subsidies for finding out more and more renewable sources, then to that extent we confine it to the green box. But if the same is to be applied for the commercial production of those biofuels, then whether we should categorize it in terms of amber box, or we should categorize it in terms of blue box, or we categorize it in terms of green box, is another challenge. The demand for the biofuels are increasing day by day, and the problem is not all kind of weather conditions or not all kind of soils they are very useful for the production of biofuels. So they have to they are basically conditioned on certain aspects, and then only we can get the maximum yield of the biofuels. It can be like the African situation, or African climatic conditions, or the climatic conditions of Latin America. They are more favorable for the production of the biofuels. But then the another challenge that arises, if those countries they start cropping biofuels, then that will lead to the depletion of the food crop, and because there will be tendency of the farmers to produce more and more of the biofuels for the export purposes. And sometimes that kind of support is being provided by the government itself to grow more of the biofuel, partly for their own consumption and partly for export earning. Now, how to categorize this? That has become a problem. And it is not only, the problem is not only confined to this. Sometimes the local people, they are the big sufferer because of the production of biofuel. How they are? Let's discuss this. With the rise in fuel prices and because of the environmental concerns, number of countries have emphasized the development of renewable energy sources, that we all know. But there are two things: that there is an increase in the prices of the fuels, and second is the requirement of biofuels for sustainability or the environmental concern. Now, basically, they have created those effects. Drawing conclusion based on the facts, it can be said that if biofuels are to make a constructive contribution to sustainable development, the public policy and the market policy of the member state need to evolve. So there has to be a right balance between the market use of the biofuel and also the use of the farmland for the agriculture product, that is for the basic requirement or for our food security. But how it works, the public policy and the market policy of the member state need to evolve both based on the assessment of their contribution to sustainable development as well as the various type of adverse implications. Discussing here from the free trade policy concern, it is necessary to analyze the nature of biofuel subsidies provided by the member state and evaluate it with the constraint on the use of subsidies. The question arises in which category state support for biofuel research and its market production is to be classified, considering the classification based on amber, blue and green box. So as stated to you, whether we categorize that kind of state support being provided for production of biofuels in amber box category, in blue box category or in green box category remains a question mark. If the biofuel subsidies are counted as restrictive agriculture subsidies, then they should be notified as trade distorting subsidies. Now, if they are restrictive agriculture subsidies, that means if we confine the meaning of the term justifiable subsidies for agriculture purposes, that then it is only confined for the food production. We are not supporting subsidies for the purpose of commercial use. We are not supporting subsidies for the purpose of export gains. So we are confining only up till the food crops, that is for the purpose of food security. Then we need to put it in a trade distorting category, either in amber box or in blue box. If they are subsidies for research and conservation, then they are exempt through the provisions of Annexure 2 and can be considered as green box subsidies. Biofuels may be defined simply as liquid or gaseous fuels produced from biomass and is used as fuel for transport. Biomass can be described as the raw material for biofuel, which may come from agriculture, forestry, or can be waste based. The main biofuels are ethanol and biodiesel. Ethanol is usually produced from sugar and starchy crops such as cereals, whereas biodiesel is processed from oilseed crops. Now, what this has led to? It has led to increase in production of these kind of crops and decline in the production of the other crops. Now, there are two effects of it. If there is a decline in production of food crop, the prices of that crop has arisen, and secondly, they are now substituted by imports. So in a way, the farmers, those countries who are getting more towards the production of biofuels, they are relying more on the import of the food crops, and their market price of their own food crops, that has gone higher. So there are two problems. One is the reliance upon the imported food crops, and secondly, the price of the domestically produced food crops has increased. However, with the growing demand for fuel crops, new challenges are emerging, challenges such as the fact that the use of corn for oil and vegetable oil from soya beans and palm oil for ethanol appears to be escalating the pressure on food prices, as we have discussed this already. Drawing conclusion based on the facts and presumption, it can be said that if biofuels are to make a constructive contribution to sustainable development, the public policy and the market policy of the member state need to evolve based on an assessment of their contribution to sustainable development and as well as through various type of adverse implications. So we need to balance between the kind of challenges we are facing if we go more for the biofuels. There are countries which are the example here. In Malaysia, the conventional method of producing biofuels is through esterification, which produces palm methyl esters primarily for the export market. These are the examples where they have faced the consequences for the overproduction of or overemphasis for the producing biofuels. Of the total production, a large amount of Malaysia's biodiesel production is exported to European Union and US. As stated to you that there are certain regions in the world which are very fertile, or they are very efficient for producing these biofuel crops, and then there are the countries which are depending upon that, like European Union and United States. Thus, it can be concluded that the profitability of Malaysian biodiesel export depends upon production cost of palm oil prices. Now, what the Malaysian government is doing, the Malaysian government is trying to reduce the cost of production so that the farmers can invest more in producing the palm oil, and then later on that can be exported to United States and to the European Union. In order to attain more profit, the production of biofuel is supported by the government subsidies. As an outcome of these developments, palm oil cultivation has relatively increased, and there is steep decline in production of other crops, except for paddy, whose land conversion to other uses is regulated. Other commodities, for example, rubber, cocoa, coconut, paper, pineapple, tobacco, coffee, tea, and sugarcane, are experiencing a decline in their areas of cultivation. So you can see the outcome, or what are the negative consequences of this kind of production of biofuel in the country. We have quoted here the example of Malaysia. With these words, I take a pause, and we will discuss this later in the next lecture. So thank you for now, and we continue further in our next lecture. Thank you.